Okay, so let's pick up where I left off on number 29. The number that, start this one over. So again, because it's got 4 parts, you're going to put parentheses around the first 2 and the last 2, including that negative. So when I look at the first one, I see that both of those numbers have an x. So I know I can take an x out, and you always take out the x with the smallest exponent. So in this case, it's not just x, it's x squared. All right? So if I take x squared, or 2 x's, out of x to the third, I just have 1 x left over. Okay, and then if I take out x squared from negative 3x squared, all that's left is the negative 3. Okay, and now look at the second parentheses. We've got negative 4x and positive 12. They don't both share an x here, so I can't take an x out, but they do both share a 4. I can divide negative 4x by 4, and I can also divide 12 by 4. But remember, I told you that if your first number in the parentheses is negative, you want to factor out a negative. So I'm not factoring out a 4, I'm going to factor out a negative 4. Okay, again, factoring out just means dividing. So I'm doing negative 4x divided by negative 4, which is a positive x. Basically, the negative 4's cancel out, and you just have x left. Then I've got positive 12 divided by negative 4, and that is negative 3. Once again, you'll notice that the 2 parentheses are the same. Okay, so I've got x minus 3 and x minus 3. Well, instead of having 2 x minus 3's, I'm just going to have 1 x minus 3. So now I'm just going to have x minus 3. Okay, so I cross out the x minus 3's above it because I took it out. All right, and now what's left over, I still have that x squared and that minus 4. But I still have to check and make sure that those don't go down any further. X minus 3 cannot go down any further. But then I've got x squared minus 4. It has a minus in the middle, so it could be a difference of 2 squares. It has an x squared, which is a perfect square. 4 is also a perfect square. I'm going to bring down the x minus 3. But then x squared minus 4 factors into a sum times a difference. The square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 4 is 2. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and work the rest of these in this section, and then I'll end that video, and then I'll go to the next section. All right? So now, number 30. This one's a little bit different. Notice this is a binomial. So usually with binomials, you have 2 options. Well, 3 options. It could have a GCF, a greatest common factor. So I'm going to look at see if there's a greatest common factor. I've got 8x to the third and a 1. 1 goes into everything. So even if I were to factor out a 1, it's not going to change anything. So there's no GCF here. All right, next I'm going to check, see if it's a difference of 2 squares. Well, in order for it to be a difference means minus, there would have to be a subtraction sign in here. There is not, so it's not a difference of 2 squares. So now I check for the third thing. Is it a sum of 2 cubes or a difference of 2 cubes? Okay, well, sum means it's got to have a plus. This one does have a plus. Difference means it's got to have a minus. This one does not have a minus. So it's not a difference of 2 cubes, but it could be a sum of 2 cubes. Sum of 2 cubes would mean that there are 2 perfect cubes being added together. Well, 8 is a perfect cube. X to the third is a perfect cube. And 1 is a perfect cube. So this is the sum of 2 cubes. All right, so the sum of 2 cubes factors into a binomial times a trinomial. All right. To figure out what the signs are going to be, you use the word SOAP. S stands for same. O stands for opposite. AP is always positive. Okay, so the same, that means whatever the sign was in your problem, so either a difference or a sum, it's going to be the same for the first one. Ours was a sum, a plus, so my first one is a plus. Next it says O, opposite. Well, the opposite of plus is minus. And then the last part, AP, always positive. So it's got to be a plus. All right? So those are my signs here. Okay, so now for the first parentheses. To get those numbers, you've got to take the cube root of both numbers. So I got to take the cube root of 8x to the third. Okay, so the cube root of 8. So 8x to the third. The cube root of 8, I'm asking basically what number times itself 3 times makes 8. And you can type that into your calculator, and it's going to give you a 2. And then the cube root of x to the third. So what number times itself 3 times makes x to the third would just be x, right? So 2x goes there. Okay, now I take the cube root of the other number. The cube root of 1. Again, you can type that in your calculator, but again, what times itself 3 times makes 1? Well, the only way to get 1 is to do 1 times 1 times 1. So the cube root of 1 is 1. All right, so that's the first parentheses. The next parentheses, we use the numbers from the first parentheses. So the 2x, we're going to square it, okay? So we're going to do 2x squared, all right? And that's going to make 4x squared. And that's how we get that first number. Then I'm going to take the 1, and I'm going to square the 1. Well, 1 squared is 1. That's how I get the last number. To get the middle number, I multiply the 2 in the first parentheses together. So 2x times 1 is 2x. And that's the middle number. Okay? And that more than likely is going to be it. You want to check and see if that last parentheses is going to factor, which it does not. And usually it's not going to. So this would be your answer. Okay, let's do 31 so we can get some more practice with it. All right, so again, I've got a binomial. So first I check for a GCF. There's nothing that goes into 64 and 125. The only thing that goes into 125 are 5s, numbers that end in 5. And no number that ends in 5 will go into 64. Okay, so now, is it a difference of 2 squares? Well, 64 is a perfect square, but u to the third is not. So it's not a difference of 2 squares. So now, is it a difference of 2 cubes? Okay, so I check the cube root of 64. And when you type that in, you should get 4. And then the cube root of u to the third is u. So that one works. So then you want to check to see if you can take the cube root of 125. And when you type that in, you should get the whole number 5. So they are both perfect cubes. So this is a difference of 2 cubes, which factors into a binomial times a trinomial. Again, you use SOAP. Same. So the same sign. This one is a difference of 2 cubes, so my same is a minus. O, opposite. The opposite of minus is plus. And AP, always positive. So the last one is a plus. All right. So luckily, I've already found my cube roots, so that helps me a lot here. Because remember, the first parentheses is just the cube root of both numbers. When I took the cube root of 64u to the third, I got 4u. And the cube root of 125 is 5. Okay, and then remember, to get your second parentheses, you use the first parentheses. We square the first one, and that's going to make 16u squared. And that goes in the first spot. Then we find the last spot. We square the 5. 5 squared is 25. Notice I didn't square -5. I just squared 5. It wouldn't matter because when you square anything, you always get a positive, right? Then to get your middle number, you multiply the 2. So 4u times 5 is 20u. And that is your answer. Okay? 32. This one should just hopefully be basic factoring. Difference is basic factoring has x, starts with an x squared and has an x in the middle. This one starts with an x to the 4th and has an x squared in the middle. Still works the same way. So it's going to factor into 2 parentheses. Okay. X to the 4th is not going to go down to x and x. It's going to go down to x squared and x squared. All right. Now I've got to find 2 numbers that multiply to equal 72 and add to equal -17. All right. So I'm going to think of all my factors of 72. You have 1 and 72. You add those, you get 73, so that's not it. 2 and some big number. So what comes to mind, and you just sit there and you keep doing all of them, what I finally get to, the ones that really pop up in my head first are 6 times 12 and 9 times 8. Okay? 6 times 12 is 72, and 9 times 8 is 72. But I also need them to add to make 17. Well, 6 plus 12 is 18. So that's not going to work. 9 plus 8 is 17. But again, I need a -17. So that means it's got to be a -9 plus a -8. So they're both negative. Okay, now because I do still have x squares in there, I need to see if I have any difference of 2 squares. In the first parentheses, I've got an x squared and a 9. Those are both perfect squares. So plus and a minus, x squared is x and x, and the square root of 9 is 3. Then I look at x squared minus 8. X squared is a perfect square, but 8 is not. So it just stays x squared minus 8. And that's your answer. All right, 33, last one for this section. U to the 4th and u squared, so 2 parentheses. U to the 4th makes u squared and u squared. Finding factors that multiply to make 6. And add to make -7. Okay, well, 1 times 6 is 6, and 1 plus 6 is 7. But I need -7, so that'd be -1 and -6, right? And that would make -7. Now I checked for difference of 2 squares. X squared minus 1, not x squared, u squared minus 1. U squared's a perfect square, 1 is a perfect square. So plus, minus. U1, U1. U squared minus 6. U squared is a perfect square, 6 is not. So this just stays U squared minus 6. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end this video and send it to you, and then I'll start the next section.